He will not last the night, and I do not propose to be caught out here with a corpse and 11 miles of drowned road behind me. Bring the horses round. Sir Talbot, bring them round. Thaddeus heard it all. That was the thing nobody in that kitchen understood. And the thing he never afterwards managed to explain to anybody. That a man may lie on a door laid across 2 trestles with his thigh broken in 2 places, and his sight going grey at the edges, and hear every syllable, and be unable to move his jaw enough to say so. Dr. Peel, your opinion. Say it out. Mortification has begun in the wound, said Peel, or will begin. In such a case, with the bone driven through as it is, and the man's blood already low, I should not care to move him, and I could not answer for him if he stayed. 12 hours, 15 at the outside. There. You have heard the physician. I heard a man take 3 sentences to say he does not know, said a woman's voice. There was a small, appalled silence. I beg your pardon? Beg it of him, not of me. He is on my kitchen door, and I want it back. The voice came nearer, and there was the sound of a basin being set down hard. You will get out of my light, all 3 of you. That leg wants washing before it wants an opinion, and I have been standing behind you with the water going cold for a quarter of an hour. Maud Hollis, said Talbot, in the tone of a man reading a label, you will not speak to Lady Arabella in that manner. I have not spoken to Lady Arabella at all, said Maud. I have spoken to you. He would hear those hooves for the rest of his life. It was 8 months before the Duke of Fenmere stood up in a public hall in his own county and said aloud what that quarter of an hour had cost him, and the saying of it cost him 1/3 of all he owned and the good name of his own blood, and he counted it cheap. But that was in the summer. On the 3rd of November it was raining sideways off the fen, and the rest of his life was being settled 6 feet from his head by 3 people who did not trouble to lower their voices, and he lay under a horse blanket and heard every word, and could not lift his hand. Thaddeus, that was Lady Arabella, close to his ear, in her carrying whisper. Thaddeus, my dear, we are going for help. Do you understand me? We are going to Heatheridge for a proper surgeon and a proper bed. You are not to be frightened. He knew even then, in the grey, that she did not mean to come back. It was in the way she said Heatheridge, which is 22 miles the wrong way from a surgeon. He cannot hear you, said Peel. Then it does not signify what I say, said Lady Arabella, and stood up, and her skirts went away across the brick floor. Miss Hollis. Talbot again, brisk now, cheerful, the business settled. You will do what can be done. The estate will not forget it. If he lives, send to Fenmere. If he dies, a pause exactly long enough to be noticed. If he dies, you had better send to the coroner at Heatheridge, and you had better have somebody in the house who is not your father, because when a gentleman dies in a lonely place with money on him, people are apt to ask what he was given, and by whom. He has no money on him. It went in the dike with the carriage. Then that is another thing they will ask, said Talbot pleasantly. Good door. The rain coming in with the door open, cold across the floor and across Thaddeus's face. Boots on the brick, a horse fussing at the mounting block, the chink of a bit. Peel's voice saying something about the causeway, Arabella laughing at something laughing, 30 feet from him on the drove, and then the whole of it going away eastward at a smart trot, and then a canter, and then nothing but the rain on the reeds. They will send back for him, said Maud Hollis. In the morning, they will send a cart. No, said a man's voice. Slow, somewhere near the fire. Listen to the horses, girl. Men who mean to send back do not go off at that pace. Thaddeus lay in the dark of his own eyelids and listened to his family leave him. Then hands came on to him, small, hard, cold from the water, and somebody cut his breeches away from the thigh with a pair of shears, unhurried, snip and snip, and a second pair of hands came onto the leg above the wound. Those hands were quite different. They were broad and dry, and they went over the bone the way a man reads a page. Now then, said the older voice. Be still. I am blind, sir, and I shall want a moment. Thaddeus got his eyes open. The room swam and settled. A low kitchen with a brick floor and a fenski's worth of dark in the window. A fire. A woman of perhaps 26 kneeling at his hip with her sleeves pinned back and a basin at her knee, brown hair coming out of its pins. A face he would not have looked at twice in a ballroom and could not afterwards stop looking at, and an expression of complete and impersonal attention, as though he were a job of work. And at his side, on a stool, a big old man with a still white-eyed face turned slightly away, his hands moving on the broken thigh, feeling. 2 breaks, said the old man, 1 clean, 1 not. The lower one has come out through the flesh, and the flesh has taken in the mud of that dike, and that is our whole trouble, and it is trouble enough. He said mortification, said Maud. He said it because it is a word that ends a conversation. The old hands went on. There is no mortification in this leg tonight. There is dirt in it, which is a different thing and can be got at. What that gentleman meant was that he did not wish to lift a heavy man in the wet. Then he is not dying. I did not say that. The old man sat back. He may die of it. He will very likely die of it if the wound is left, and he will certainly die of it if he is put in a cart tonight and driven 11 miles, and he will lose the leg entire if we are slow. So we shall not be slow. He turned his white-eyed face to the ceiling and said, in exactly the voice of a man asking for the salt, Maud, get the door off the hinges in the back kitchen, we shall want it under him level. 2 candles at his hip and 1 at my left hand. The sailmaker's needle out of the roll and the waxed thread. Boil the shears and the tweezers a full 5 minutes by the clock. The brandy that is behind the flour, not the brandy that is in the cupboard, and my father's tourniquet strap out of the chest. Yes, and bar that door. If those horses come back tonight, I do not want them in my kitchen. Thaddeus found his voice at last. It came out of him like something dragged over gravel. Who are you? The old man's face came round towards the sound. Elias Hollis, he said. 21 years surgeon's mate afloat, and 11 years blind, and it is my door you are lying on. This is my daughter Maud, who keeps the gate here and does the seeing for both of us. And you, sir, are the Duke of Fenmere, whose bank that is out there, and whose drove that is, and whose fault it is that the near-side rail on that causeway has been rotten since Whitsun. Father, he asked who I was, said Elias Hollis. I have told him. Now, sir, I am going to hurt you a great deal, and I am going to go on hurting you for the best part of an hour, and there is nothing at all to be done about that, so you may swear at me as much as you like, and I shall not mind it. Maud, the candles. She set them down. Thaddeus turned his head. It was the only part of him that still answered, and looked up at her, and she looked back at him with that same flattering attention, and said the first thing she ever said to him directly. Bite on this, your grace. You will want to. He bit on it. The hour that followed had no shape to it afterwards. There were candles going and coming, and the smell of hot brandy and scorched thread, and the blind man saying, hold, and turn him a little towards me, and good in the same unhurried voice all the way through. And a woman's forearm across his chest, and her weight on it, and her counting, she counted out loud, steadily, from 1 to 20 and back again, over and over, and somewhere in the second 100 he understood that she was not counting for the old man at all. She was counting for him so that there should be something in the room besides the pain, and she never once let the count go ragged. At some point he said, do not take the leg. Nobody is taking anything, said Maud Hollis. 14, 15, 16. At some point he said something about his cousin. Yes, she said. 19, 20, 19, 18. It was done a little after 2. They splinted the thigh between 2 lengths of sawn ash and a rolled sail, and strapped it, and got 4 blankets over him, and Elias Hollis washed his hands in the basin for a long while with his blind face turned to the wall and said nothing to anybody. Thaddeus slept and did not sleep. Once in the grey he woke, and the fire was banked, and the old man was asleep in the chair with his mouth open, and the woman was not in the room at all. She came in at first light with the rain still on her. She had been out. Her skirt was black with wet to the waist, and her boots were full of the drove, and there was fen mud to the elbow of her right sleeve, and she was carrying a wet sack in both arms as though it were heavy. She did not put it down by the fire. She carried it past him, past the trestles, to the chest under the window where her father's instruments were kept, and put it in, and shut the lid, and stood a moment with both hands flat on the lid. Then she took her boots off, and hung her skirt on the fender, and looked at the strapping on his leg by the window light, and said, Your Grace, can you hear me this morning? Yes. Good, said Maud. Then we shall try you with some milk. He did not ask her, that morning or for 14 weeks after, what was in the sack. It did not seem to him at the time to be a thing of any importance whatsoever. Send to Fenmere. I have sent to Fenmere. Send again. I sent on Tuesday and I sent on Thursday, said Maud, and both letters went by the eelman, who is honest, and neither has been answered, and I am not going to spend another 6 pence on paper this week to please you. It was the 6th of November, and the Duke of Fenmere had a fever of 103, and had discovered, in the way of such men, that being frightened made him extremely disagreeable. You do not know that they were delivered. They were delivered. The eelman was given a shilling at the kitchen door at Fenmere on Tuesday, and told to say nothing about it in the village, and he told me so within the hour. Because he is honest, and because a shilling for saying nothing is the sort of thing a fen man dines out on, she wrung the cloth out over the basin. Lift your chin. I will not be, lift your chin, your grace, or lie in your own sweat. It is entirely as you please, and it is all one to me. He lifted his chin. The toll house at Saint's Drove had 2 rooms below and a loft above, and smelled of tallow and wet wool and smoked eel and the fen, which is a smell of black water and cut sedge and cannot be got out of anything. He lay in the kitchen, on the door, on trestles, 3 feet from the fire, because there was nowhere else on the ground floor to put a man who could not be moved, and he was there 5 days before he understood that the trestles had been Maud Hollis's bed, and that she had been sleeping in the chair. He was disagreeable about that too, when he found it out. You should have told me. To what end? You cannot walk up a ladder to the loft, and I cannot carry you up one. She was scouring the basin with sand. It is a chair, your grace. My father slept 21 years in a hammock 9 inches from another man's boots, and has never once complained of a chair in my hearing. I have not thanked you. No, I am obliged to you. You are not obliged to me, said Maud. You are obliged to my father, who put your bone back where it belonged with a fever coming on you and his hands cold, and who has been up at 3 every night since to feel your leg. I have carried the water. Be obliged to the person who did the work. Elias Hollis, from his stool by the fire, where he was splitting sedge for lights by touch at a rate of perhaps 40 a minute, said, Do not be obliged to anybody yet. Being obliged is for men who are out of the wood. Am I in the wood? You are in the middle of it, said the old man cheerfully, and it is a wood that lasts a fortnight, and I have known better men than you go down in it on the 11th day for no reason at all. Maud, the bandage on that thigh wants changing at 4, and I want the good linen this time and not the coarse. There is no good linen left, father. Then there is a sheet. There is the sheet, Maud agreed, which is on the bed you are lying in, and went out to the pump. When she had gone out, Thaddeus lay looking at the smoke stain on the ceiling. She is very free with her opinions, he said. She is, Elias agreed. I have been nursed before. There is a way of doing the thing. There is a way of doing it in a house with 11 servants, said the old man, splitting sedge. You are not in one. Split, split. Say what you have got in your mouth, sir, and be done with it. You have been chewing on it since Monday. Very well. I do not choose to be handled by a toll-keeper's daughter. The sedge went on splitting for a while. No, said Elias Hollis. No, I dare say you do not. And I did not choose to be blinded at 9:40 by a shot fired early in another man's clay pit, and my daughter did not choose to be a toll-keeper's daughter, and the Duke of Fenmere did not choose to go off a rotten rail into a dike on a wet Tuesday. Split. There is a deal of not choosing in this kitchen tonight. Split. You will find, sir, if you live, that the hands which are on you at 3 in the morning are the only ones worth being particular about. There are 2 pairs of them in this parish. They are both of them mine, and 1 pair is out at the pump. It was on the 8th of November, in the middle of the night, that Thaddeus asked her the question he had been carrying about for 5 days. Why have you not put me in a cart? The fire had gone down to a red eye. She was in the chair with a shawl round her and her feet on the fender, and he had thought she was asleep. Because it would kill you, she said without opening her eyes. That is not the whole of it. No, she agreed. It is not. She got up and made the fire and sat down on the stool where her father sat by day, and told him, in a low flat voice with no complaint in it anywhere, exactly what his lying on her kitchen door was worth. That the drove was a toll road and had been since her grandmother's time, and the toll house went with the keeping of it, and the tolls came to about £11 in a good year, and 8 in a bad one, and there had been 3 bad ones. That she and her father held the house of the Fenmere estate. That in September a man had come out from Fenmere with a printed paper about the new drainage, in which Saints Drove was to be stopped up as a public way, and the traffic carried round by the Wickend Bank, and that when a road is stopped up there are no tolls. And when there are no tolls there is no toll keeper, no toll house. Whose man? Sir Talbot's. He brought the paper himself in October and read it out to my father in this kitchen, very slowly, twice. Her voice did not alter. And he said, at the door, going out, that these things were always easier when the family were of one mind, and that he hoped my father would be sensible when the time came, seeing his age and his affliction and the want of anywhere else to go. And when I am dead, when you are dead. Sir Talbot is the Duke of Fenmere, said Maud, and the drove is stopped up by Lady Day, and my father and I are on the Heatheridge road with a chest of instruments and 11 shillings, and the parish will take us in and put my father in the men's side and me in the women's. And he will not last a year of it, and he knows he will not, and neither of us has said so out loud in this house. The fire ticked. So you are keeping me alive for a toll house. He said it to be cruel. He was quite clear about that afterwards. He had been in pain for 6 days and had been left on a door by his own blood, and he wanted, badly, to make somebody else bleed a little. Maud Hollis considered it. If I were, she said, it would be a very good reason, and I should not be ashamed of it. But no. She reached over and took his wrist without asking and put 2 fingers on it and counted, looking at the fire. There is a better one, and I am not going to tell it to you tonight, because you would make something ugly of it before morning, and I have not the linen to spare. That is not an answer. It is not, she said, and put his wrist down. Your pulse is 96. It was 120 on Tuesday. Go to sleep. There was one more thing, and she said it at the door with the candle in her hand, because she was an honest woman and she had thought about it. Sir Talbot said something else before he rode off, and you may as well have it. He said that when a gentleman dies in a lonely place with money on him, people ask what he was given and by whom. There was no money on you. But there is a coroner at Heatheridge, and there is an unmarried woman in this house, and there is a physician who has written down mortification in his book with the day and the hour on it. She blew out the candle. So if you die on that door, your grace, I do not lose a toll house. I lose a great deal more than that, and I have known it since the 3rd of November, and I have gone on washing that leg every 4 hours all the same. Make what you like of it. The 11th day was the bad one, as Elias had said it would be. Thaddeus remembered almost nothing of it except that at some point he was certain he was on the causeway again with the rail giving way, and that somebody had hold of both his hands and would not let go of them however hard he pulled. On the 12th he woke up thin and clear and hungry, and the old man laughed out loud when he heard him ask for food. There, out of the wood. Now you may be obliged to somebody. And on the night of the 13th of November the rain that had been falling on 3 counties for 9 days came down the mere load all at once, and the Galt Bank went at 2 in the morning with a noise like a wall coming down. And the water came over the drove and under the toll house door and across the brick floor to the depth of a hand. Thaddeus woke with the cold of it and the dark full of the sound of running, and there was a lantern swinging at the window, and men shouting on the drove, and a pump bumping along the wall. Maud Hollis. She had the door open with the water pouring past her ankles. Here. Bank's gone at Galt and it'll go at Sedgeholt inside the hour, and there's 4 foot coming down this drove behind me. We've got Wickend Chapel dry, and then there's room in the punt for you and old Elias and no more. Come away, girl. Now. And the Duke of Fenmere lay on a door on 2 trestles in 8 inches of black fen water, unable to sit up, and listened for the answer. I'll not leave him. Maud, you have heard me. Take my father. I am blind, said Elias Hollis from the middle of the room, standing in the water in his shirt with his hands out for the table edge. Not useless. I have been in worse water than this with a ship under me. You are blind and you are 71 and I want you alive on Thursday, said Maud. Get in the punt. Maud, Get in the punt, father, or I shall put you in it. And there are 3 men here who will help me, and you will not like being carried, and I shall not like doing it. There is room for one, and it is not going to be me." They took him. It took the 3 of them, and it was not dignified, and nobody in that kitchen ever spoke of it again. At the wall, the old man got hold of the doorpost with one hand and turned his white-eyed face back into the room. 4 hours on that leg, he said. 4 hours, girl, whatever else the night does. And keep his feet out of it. Wet feet will finish him quicker than the flood. Yes, and Maud, yes. "You are a fool," said Elias Hollis, "and I have never in my life been prouder of anybody." The lantern went off along the drove, and the shouting went with it, and then there was nothing in the world but black water going past the door in the dark, and the sound of it, which is a sound like a crowd talking a long way off. Thaddeus lay on the door with the water an inch below him and said, "Go after them. Call them back. You can be on that punt in a minute. Be quiet. Miss Hollis, be quiet. Your Grace, I am thinking, and you are a great deal heavier than you look." What she did next, he from 4 inches above the flood, by the light of one candle stuck in a bottle on the mantel, and he thought about it, on and off, for the rest of his life. She could not lift him. She had known that before she started, so she did not try to lift him. She brought the kitchen table over, dragged it, floating half of it, until it fetched up against the trestles, and then she got the long ash plank they used for the gate bar, and a nail keg, and levered the head of the door up 6 inches at a time, wedging it with the keg, and then with a stool, and then with the flour bin, working from one end and then the other, so that the door and the man on it went up like a coffin lid being raised, and at last she got the whole of it slid across onto the tabletop, 4 foot off the brick, with his splintered leg never once out of the line of his hip. It took her the better part of an hour. She said nothing at all while she did it except once, when the flour bin slipped, and what she said then was "No," flatly to the bin. Then she got the candles and the tender and her father's chest up onto the dresser, and the fire was long gone, and she stood in the black water in the dark to the knee and took stock of her kitchen. "Well," she said, "you are dry. No, Miss Hollis, come up on the table. There is no room, and it would not hold us. Then sit on the dresser." "I shall want the dresser at 4 o'clock, said Maud, "to stand on when I do your leg," and she took the shawl off her own shoulders and put it over his chest, and waded across, and sat down on the stairs to the loft with her feet in the water and her arms round her knees, and stayed there. It was 6 hours till light. Somewhere in the middle of them he said, "You should have gone." "Yes. Why did you not?" "You are the 3rd person to ask me that this week," said Maud out of the dark, "and it is beginning to be tiresome. Ask me in the spring." He lay listening to the water go past underneath him. "Your father called you a fool." "He did. Was he wrong?" "He is never wrong about anything," said Maud, "which is a great trial to live with. Go to sleep, Grace. I cannot. Then talk if you must. Only do not sit up." So he talked. He had not the smallest, and afterwards what about the causeway, he thought, and a horse he had owned at 19, and his mother's glasshouse, and a quantity of nonsense. And every so often out of the dark a voice said, "Yes," or "Well, that was foolish," or "On." And somewhere towards 4 in the morning he understood that she was doing exactly what she had done with the counting on the first night, and had been doing it for 6 hours, sitting in cold water on a staircase, and would deny it flatly if he put it to her. He did not put it to her. The water stood at a foot until 4 in the morning, and was gone by 9, and left behind it a floor of grey silt an inch deep that smelled of the bottom of the fen, and Maud Hollis spent the whole of that day on her knees with a shovel and a pail and a scrubbing brush. And at 3:30 in the afternoon a punt came back up the drove with her father in it, and 3 men who would not take anything for their trouble, and had to be given ale and beer, which they took. The Duke of Fenmere lay on the kitchen table and watched the parish of Wick End put a house back together, and was not consulted about any of it. He began to get better after that, which was when he became truly insufferable, and he knew it at the time, and could not seem to stop. He wanted his own linen. He wanted his own coffee. He wanted a barber. On the 18th he told her that when he was at Fenmere he would send out a proper nurse from Hetheridge and a woman to do the cooking, and that she might consider herself discharged with a year's wages. And Maud went on scouring the pot and said, "Very good, your grace," in a voice that took the skin off him from the ankle up. He asked for a barber on the 19th as well. "There is no barber this side of Hetheridge. Then I shall grow a beard like a Dutchman." "You will not," said Maud, "because my father shaves himself every morning of his life, that razor on the shelf, and if a blind man can be shaved, a duke can be." She took it down and stropped it. "Keep still. If you flinch I shall cut you, and I shall not beg your pardon for it, because it will have been your flinching." She shaved him at the kitchen table in 9 minutes with a steady hand and the tip of her tongue between her teeth, and he lay under the razor looking at the smoke stain on the ceiling and thought about nothing at all, which was a considerable improvement upon the last fortnight. "There," she said, wiping the blade, "now you look less like a corpse and more like a gentleman, and I am not persuaded that is a gain." On the 19th he told her that she need not come in to him in the mornings, that he would call when he wanted her. "There is no bell in this house," said Maud. "Then somebody will." "There is nobody. There is my father and there is me." She set the bowl down. "You have been in this kitchen 16 days, and you have not yet understood the arithmetic of it. There is no housekeeper to complain to. There is no groom. If you send me out of this room, your grace, the room is empty. That is the whole establishment. I am aware. You are not aware. You have never once in your life been in a house where the whole establishment is standing in front of you holding a bowl." She picked it up again. "Now, your leg or your temper. You may have one of them seen to before dinner and not both." And on the 20th of November she came in from the gate and dried her hands and took down the slate that hung by the door and brought it over and held it in front of him. "What is this?" "The toll," said Maud. He looked at it. Under a column of penciled entries in her hand, "A drover with 60 sheep, a lime cart, 3 saddle horses," was written in the same hand under the date of the 3rd of November. "Carriage and pair, and 1 saddle horse behind, entering Saints' Drove at the Fenmere end. 6 pence. You are charging me a toll." "You came in on my drove," said Maud Hollis. "So did the carriage you came off, and so did the 3 that went away again, and I have not charged for those because they were leaving, and I am not a thief. 6 pence, your grace." Thaddeus started to laugh, and it hurt his leg, and he did it anyway. It was the first time since the 3rd of November, and it went on rather longer than the joke deserved, and at the end of it he found her looking at him with something in her face that had not been there before, and that went away as soon as he saw it. "I have no money." "I know. It is in the dike with your carriage. It says owing." She hung the slate back on its nail. "I shall get it off you in the spring." The letter came on the 22nd, brought out by the eel man, who had ridden a borrowed horse from Fenmere in the dark and would not come in. It was not from Sir Talbot. It was 4 lines from the steward at Fenmere, written small, and Maud read it aloud twice because Thaddeus made her. "Your grace, I have this hour had your grace's 2nd letter, the first not having been shown me. Sir Talbot returned on the 4th and gave out that your grace died upon the causeway. The household is in black. The hatchment went up over the door on Tuesday se'nnight. I am ordered to answer no letters. I do not know what to do, and there is no one here I dare ask. You will have to write it." "I cannot hold the pen." "Then say it slowly," said Maud, "and do not say 'and whereas,' because I shall not write it." It took them 4 evenings to get 6 letters out of the toll house at Saints' Drove, to the steward at Fenmere, to the Duke's attorney at Hetheridge, to the bank, to the Lord Lieutenant of the county, to the rector at Sedgeholt, who was a magistrate, and to the London physician who had written mortification in his book, and would presently wish he had not. Thaddeus dictated them lying flat with his hands on the blanket. It is a humbling business, dictating a letter of that kind to a woman sitting at your elbow with your own weakness in front of her in ink, and by the 2nd evening he had stopped trying to sound like a duke, and the letters got a great deal better. Read it back. "I am alive. I am at the toll house at Saints' Drove in the parish of Wick End, where I have been since the 3rd of November, my thigh being broken in 2 places when the carriage went off the causeway at the Rotten Rail. I am attended by Mr. Elias Hollis, formerly surgeon's mate, and by his daughter. I am not able to write with my own hand, and this is written for me by Miss Hollis, which you may verify by comparing it with the toll book." She stopped. That last is mine. You may strike it out. Why did you put it in? Because your attorney will be shown that letter by somebody who wishes it to be a forgery, said Maud, and there is 14 years of my hand in that tall book on the nail, and it is the only proof of anything in this house. Thaddeus lay looking at her. Leave it in, he said. She wrote on. The pen scratched. The fire drew. Out on the drove the frost had got into the reeds, and they went off like small dry fireworks whenever the wind came across, and the whole kitchen smelled of eel smoke, because the eel man had begun coming twice a week and would not be paid. Miss Hollis. There was a pig. The pen stopped for a fraction of a second and then went on. There was a pig in the sty behind this house on the 4th of November, said Thaddeus, because I heard it, and it was a good deal of pig by the noise of it, and there has been no pig since the 8th. And there has been beef tea in this kitchen 4 times a day for 3 weeks, and beef does not walk up a drove in November of its own accord. You have a great deal of time on your hands. Where is the pig? The pig is at Wick End, said Maud, in about 11 pieces, and it fetched £2.15, and the £2.15 is gone, and I will thank you not to make a scene about it in front of my father, who does not know. He does know, said Elias Hollis from the fire. He is not supposed to know. He has been eating eel 4 times a week and no pork at all since Martinmas, said the old man, and he has been blind 11 years and not stupid for a day of it. Go on with the letter, girl. Thaddeus said, I will replace it. You will replace it, Maud agreed, in the spring along with the 6pence, and I shall take both and be glad of them, and that is not the same thing as being paid, and I want you to keep the 2 apart in your head. They look very alike from here. They do not look at all alike from here, said Maud Hollis, and here is where I am sitting. He learned a good deal that fortnight, and almost none of it was about himself, which was itself an education. He learned that the fen came to the toll house, not for the toll, for Elias. A drover with a wrist, a woman from Sedgeholt with a boy who had come off a gate, a lighterman's father with a chest. They came at all hours and knocked at the window and were let in. And the old man sat on his stool and had them brought to him and put his hands on them and told them what was the matter, and was right, and was paid in eel and sedge and eggs and a goose at Christmas, and twice, that Thaddeus saw, in nothing at all. He watched Elias Hollis set a collarbone by touch, talking all the while about the weather, with the boy's mother holding a candle at the exact height she was told to hold it. How do you know where it is? Because I have got my fingers on it, said Elias. How do you know where your own nose is, sir? You have never once looked at it. They got him off the table on the 7th of December. It took Elias, Maud, the eel man and the doorpost, and it was not a success. He came upright with all his weight on the sound leg and his hands on 2 shoulders, and the room went white at the edges, and they had him back on the table inside 15 seconds with his teeth going like a boy's. Well, said Elias, that was nothing at all. That was standing, said the old man. You will not do it better by being angry at it. Tomorrow the same and the day after the same, and by the middle of January you will do it and swear at me while you do it, which is the sign that it is working. How long? To stand 3 weeks. To walk across this kitchen 6. To walk out of it longer than you will like. Elias put both hands flat on the thigh. And you shall have the rest of it now, sir, so that you may do your raging early and be done. That bone has set short, better than an inch short, when the swelling is out. You will want a stick on that side for the remainder of your life and a boot built up under the heel, and there is no man living in anywhere else who can give you back the inch. Thaddeus lay still for a long while. Say it again. An inch, said Elias Hollis, and a stick. Thank you, said Thaddeus, and found, to his considerable surprise, that he meant it. He learned that they called him Duke in the fen to his face, and not your grace, and that this was neither insolence nor familiarity, but something older and flatter than either, and that they had opinions about the drainage bill which were better informed than his own, and that a man called Fenmere had been the landlord of every one of them for 400 years, and not one of them had ever spoken to him. He learned that no letter came from Lady Arabella. That took 11 days to arrive at, because he did not admit to himself that he was counting. The steward wrote twice. The attorney wrote on the 9th of December and came out on the 11th through half a foot of mud, and stayed 2 hours, and went away white about the mouth. 2 of the Fenmere tenants sent word. The rector at Sedgeholt sent a Stilton. The attorney had offered her money before he went. Thaddeus heard the whole of it through the door, which she did not know. A bank order for £100, madam, on the Fenmere account, for the accommodation and the trouble. No, madam, it is not charity, it is a perfectly proper. It is £100, said Maud, and if I take £100 off that estate this month, then when somebody at Heatheridge asks me in a witness box what I was given for it, I shall have to answer £100, and every other word I say will be worth nothing whatever. Pause. Write in your book that I refused it, sir. Put the day and the hour, and set your name to it, and let me watch you do it. That is what I will take, and there is nothing else in your case I want. The attorney had written it in his book. Nothing came from Heatheridge, where she was, 22 miles off, in her father's house, and had been since the 4th of November. You are quiet tonight, said Maud on the 11th. I am thinking about a woman. Then you are quiet for a poor reason. Lift your arm. I have been betrothed since the spring, said Thaddeus, to a lady who you are sitting on the 3rd of November, and told me not to be frightened. She has written 11 miles further than this to order a bonnet. I have had it from the eel man, who has it from the carrier. Maud strapped the bandage and cut the end. Do you want me to be sorry for you? I want somebody to be. Then you had better ask somebody who has the leisure, said Maud, and got up and took the basin out, and at the door she stopped and said, in a different voice and without turning round, it was ill done of her, all the same. I have thought so since the 3rd of November, and I should have said it before now if I had thought you were fit to hear it. He asked her the next day what he owed. You have had the slate. 6pence. 6pence. For 11 weeks, for 6 weeks of your bed, and your food, and your pig, and your father's hands, and your— He stopped. 6pence. 6pence is what is owing, said Maud Hollis. The toll is a public charge, and it is fixed by the commissioners, and it is on a board at the gate, and you may look at it when you can walk. The rest was not sold to you, your grace, and so there is no price on it, and if you put one on it you will make it a different thing altogether, and I shall not forgive you for that. She rinsed the cloth. Do you understand me? No, said Thaddeus truthfully. No, she agreed. Well, there is time. There was not, in fact, very much time. On the 16th of December at dusk, with the frost coming down hard and a red sky over the mere load, Maud came in from the gate with the lantern and set it on the table and said, in a voice Thaddeus had not heard her use before, there are 3 horses on the drove, and one of them is a grey with a white face, and he has a man on his offside carrying a case, and they are coming at a walk, which means they mean to stop. Talbot rides a grey with a white face, Thaddeus. Yes, said Maud. I thought he might. My dear Thaddeus, thank God, thank God. Sir Talbot came into the kitchen at Saint's Drove with the frost still smoking off his shoulders and his hands out, and got hold of both of Thaddeus before Thaddeus could do anything about it, and stood there gripping them and shaking his head slowly from side to side. We were told you were gone. Do you understand me? We were told on the causeway that you could not last the night by a physician of the first eminence, and I have had a fortnight I would not wish upon my worst enemy. You put a hatchman over my door. I put a hatchment over your door, said Talbot, because I believed you dead, and because a great house must be seen to do the proper thing, and I would do it again tomorrow on the same information. He let go at last and pulled up the stool and sat down on it and looked, for a moment, entirely sincere. You look very ill. I am very well. You look, said Talbot, like a man who has been lying in a fen for 11 weeks. 6. Yes. A small pause, precisely placed. You see. Dr. Peel had come in behind him and had not spoken and did not come near the table. The third man was a stranger in a black coat with a japanned case, who set the case on the dresser without being asked and opened it. Maud stood at the fire with the poker in her hand, not because she meant anything by it, but because she had been making up the fire when they knocked, and she did not put it down. Who is that? said Thaddeus. That is Mr. Well. He is an attorney, and he is here because there is a paper, and I would 10,000 times rather have burnt it in the Fenmere library this morning than bring it out here. Talbot's face did something creditable. But it is served, Thaddeus. It was served on the 12th in London. It cannot be unserved by any wishing of mine. Read it. The attorney read it. It was a petition to the Lord Chancellor, praying that a commission might issue in the nature of a writ de lunatico inquirendo, to inquire by the oaths of good and lawful men, whether his Grace the Duke of Fenmere was of sound mind and capable of the government of himself and his estates, and that upon such finding, the person and estate be committed to the care of his nearest of kin, being Sir Talbot, his father's brother's son. The particulars took 4 minutes. Thaddeus listened to all of them lying flat on a kitchen table. That his Grace had suffered a violent injury to the head and body on the 3rd of November and a fever of 11 days. That his own physician of eminence, being Dr. Peel, had attended him upon that night and had found him in a settled delirium, and would depose that in his professional judgment such an injury with such a fever must in the ordinary course produce a permanent derangement of the understanding. That his Grace had thereafter refused the said physician and all other regular medical attendance, and had committed himself for upwards of 11 weeks to the hands of an unlicensed blind man of 71 and his daughter, in a toll house upon a fen drove. That his Grace could not write his own name, and that all letters in his name since the 3rd of November had been written by the hand of the said daughter. That the estate had stood ungoverned since November, no rents received, no timber sold, no accounts kept. That his Grace had been heard to make gifts and promises of gifts of an extravagant kind to persons in that house. The last is a lie, said Thaddeus. It is not sworn to yet, said the attorney comfortably. It is a particular. It will be sworn to or not sworn to at the inquiry. Peel, said Thaddeus. The physician looked at the dresser. Peel, look at me. Your Grace, on the 3rd of November you stood in this room and said 12 hours, 15 at the outside. Thaddeus's voice was perfectly level. It is the 16th of December. Recovery in such a case is not unknown, said Peel to the dresser. Will you depose to a settled delirium? I shall depose to what I observed. You observed me for 9 minutes by that clock, and you did not once put your hand upon the leg, and the man who'd put his hands upon it is sitting on that stool and has been blind 11 years. Thaddeus let it stand a moment. How much? Your Grace insults me. How much, Peel? Dr. Peel took his hat off the dresser and walked out into the frost without answering, and that was the answer. And when is the inquiry? The commission sits at the Sessions House at Heatheridge, said the attorney, before the commissioner and a jury of 23, upon the 14th of February, 59 days. Thaddeus lay and looked at the ceiling, at the smoke stain shaped like a heron that he had been looking at since the 3rd of November, and felt something go quite cold and quite steady in the middle of him. Talbot, my dear fellow, if they find me incapable, what is your first act? Sir Talbot did not even pause. Fenmere is bleeding to death and has been since your father's time, and the drainage is the only thing that will save it, and the drainage requires the drove to be stopped up and the water carried round by Wick End. He said it patiently, as a reasonable man to a sick one. I should sign the order in the first week. I have said so to your face in this room before witnesses, which is more than most men in my position would trouble to do. And these people are tenants at will of an estate that pays them £11 a year to open a gate, said Talbot. They will be dealt with as the estate deals with everybody. He got up then and brushed his knees and turned to the fire, and Thaddeus saw the whole of the rest of it coming a half-second before it happened and could not move to stop it. Miss Hollis, a word. You may say it where he can hear it, as you like. Talbot took out a pocket-book. You have had a great deal of trouble and no wages. That is not just whatever else is. There is £50 here, and there is a cottage at Sedgeholt with a garden and a slate roof that falls vacant at Lady Day, and it is in my gift, and your father would have a dry room in it and never see a fen winter again. For what? For the truth, said Talbot. For going into that hall on the 14th of February and saying what you have seen in this kitchen, the fever, the wandering, what he said in the 11 days. Nothing invented, nothing embroidered, the plain truth on your oath, that a man who talked as he talked at the height of that fever is not a man fit to have 9,000 acres and 400 souls in his hands. He held out the pocket-book. You would be doing him a kindness, Miss Hollis, and I am not ashamed to say I would be doing you one. The kitchen was very quiet. The frost went off in the reeds outside like small dry shot. Maud Hollis put the poker down in the fender, carefully, so that it did not ring. He talked about his mother's glass house, she said, and a horse he had at 19. And on the 9th night he cried out about the rail on the causeway, which is your rail, Sir Talbot, and has been rotten since Whitsun, and which the commissioners have written to Fenmere about twice. She wiped her hands on her apron. That is what I saw in this kitchen. I shall be very glad to say it on my oath in a public hall, and you need not give me £50 for it, and you may take that cottage at Sedgeholt and let it to somebody who wants it. Talbot put the pocket-book away without any change of expression whatever. You are a proud woman. I am a poor one, said Maud. It is often mistaken. Well, he drew on his gloves, finger by finger. One thing more, and then we will leave him to rest. You will be served in the new year. My counsel means to call you. Maud looked up. As your witness? As my best one, said Sir Talbot, and smiled at her almost kindly. You have sat alone with an unmarried gentleman of great fortune in this room for 11 weeks, Miss Hollis, and you have written every letter he has sent, and he has made you promises. You will not have to say one word that is untrue. You will simply have to be looked at by 23 men out of this county, while my counsel asks you your age and your income and how you came to be so obliging. The 3 of them went out. The grey with the white face went off along the drove at a walk, unhurried, into the dark. Thaddeus heard the gate, he heard Maud drop the bar. He heard her stand there with her hand on it for rather a long time. Elias said to the ceiling, Sir, the 14th of February. Can I be got on my feet by it? The old man came over and put his broad dry hands on the splintered thigh and was silent for a while. On your feet, with a stick and a boot built up, and no promises about the stairs at Heatheridge, he said. And it will hurt you every day from now until then, and there will be days you weep at it, and I am too old to be gentle about it, and my daughter will hold you up because there is nobody else to do it. Begin tonight, said the Duke of Fenmere. Maud came back from the door with the lantern still in her hand, and did not put it down either. 23 men, she said, out of this county. Yes. I have kept a gate on the Heatheridge Road 14 years, and I know exactly what 23 men out of this county look like. When a gentleman in a good coat begins asking a woman her age, she hung the lantern on its nail. I am not frightened of it. I want you to have that from me tonight, because on the day I shall very likely look as though I am. Maud, Miss Hollis, she said, until the 15th of February. After that we shall see. Again. I have done it 4 times. You have done it 4 times badly, said Elias Hollis. Do it a 5th time badly and we shall call it a morning. The Duke of Fenmere learned to stand up in a fen kitchen between the 23rd of December and the 11th of January, and there is no dignified way to describe any part of it. He stood by hauling on a rope that Maud had made fast to the beam. He fell twice. He was sick once from the pain, in a pail she held for him and took out afterwards without a word and never mentioned again. On the 2nd of January he got across the brick floor from the table to the door. 9 feet in a little under 4 minutes on 2 sticks, with the sweat running off his jaw, and Elias, who could not see it, knew from the sound of the sticks exactly where he was the whole way and said, good at the right moment every time. At the door Thaddeus put his forehead against the wood and breathed. 9 feet, he said. 9 feet on the 2nd of January, said Elias, is 100 yards on the 14th of February, if you do not do anything stupid, and you will do something stupid, because you are a duke. They kept Christmas with a goose from the rector at Sedgeholt and a plum pudding from the eelman's wife, and Maud roasted the goose in a kitchen with a man on a table in it, and the 3 of them ate at 4 o'clock with the snow going past the window sideways. Elias sang. He had a very good voice and had sung in a ship's chapel for 21 years, and he sang 3 verses of something Thaddeus had never heard, and Maud came in on the last line without appearing to notice that she had. Thaddeus thought afterwards that it was the pleasantest day he had ever spent in his life, and that he had spent it flat on his back in a toll house on £11 a year. The subpoena came on the 6th of January. It came out from Heatheridge with a clerk who would not take his hat off, and it required Maud Hollis, spinster of the toll house at Saints' Drove in the parish of Wick End, to attend the Sessions House at Heatheridge on the 14th day of February to give evidence upon the part of the petitioner. She read it standing at the window. Then she folded it in three and put it behind the tea canister on the mantel, which was where the toll book receipts went, and said, "Well, that is that," and went out to see to the gate. Thaddeus had his attorney's opinion on it within the week, and it was not one he liked. He says you cannot be excused. I did not ask to be excused. He says worse than that. He says that if we apply to have you excused, their counsel will stand up in a public hall and say that the woman who kept me alive is afraid to be looked at, and that it will be the best half-hour of their case. Then we shall not apply, said Maud. They mean to take you to pieces in front of 23 men and every soul in this county who can get a seat. Yes, and you will stand there and let them do it. I shall stand there, said Maud Hollis, and answer what I am asked, and come home on the carrier's cart, and open that gate on the 15th for anybody who wants to come through it, including them. She threaded a needle against the window light. It is not courage, before you tell me it is. It is only that there is nowhere else to be standing. Dr. Peel's affidavit was sworn on the 9th and was in the Heatheridge paper on the 15th, or the substance of it was, in a paragraph of 11 lines under the heading Melancholy Case in High Life. Somebody sent it out to the toll house wrapped round a bottle of physic that nobody had ordered. It said that a nobleman of this county, lately supposed dead, was living in a state of great seclusion in a labourer's dwelling upon the fen, attended by no regular practitioner, and that an inquiry was shortly to be held touching his capacity, and it said that the household in which he lay consisted of a blind man of advanced years and his unmarried daughter. It managed to be entirely true and to be a lie from the first word to the last, and Thaddeus read it 4 times and learned something from it that he had not learned in 39 years of being a duke. They will print your name next, he said. They have printed it, said Maud. The clerk said so. It is in the London paper on Thursday with my age. Maud, you will want the strapping off at 11, she said, and I want the gate seen to, so we will not have this conversation now or, I hope, at all. The fen took a side in the 3rd week of January. Did not announce itself. That is not how the fen does anything. It arrived in the form of the eelman standing in the doorway with his hat in his hands on a Tuesday morning, saying that there had been a bit of talk at Wick End Chapel, and that there were 11 men and 4 women who would come to Heatheridge on the 14th if it would answer, and that they had put by the money for the carrier's cart between them, and that they'd not want anything, and that he was to say particularly that they did not want anything. 11 men, said Thaddeus. 15 Duke with the women. 16 if old Sedge's boy can get the day. To say what? To say what they've seen, said the eelman, surprised. Which is you, sitting up in that chair Tuesday last week, eating your dinner and arguing about the drainage bill, which the whole parish has watched you do through that window since Christmas, because there's nothing else to look at out here. He turned his hat round. There's a paper saying you're mad, Duke. Well, we've seen you. That's all it is. The rector at Sedgeholt, who was a magistrate, wrote to the commissioner on the 20th and sent a copy to Fenmere and another to the Heatheridge paper, and it was a very dry letter, and it did a great deal of damage. Word came out from the steward at Fenmere twice a week, and none of it was good. Sir Talbot had sold the beech hanging at Sedgeholt standing for £600 in January, which is no month to sell timber in. He had put off 4 of the outdoor men. He had had the stopping up order for Saints' Drove engrossed fare and left lying on the estate room table, dated, wanting nothing but a signature he had not yet the right to give. He is spending my money to prove that I cannot spend it, said Thaddeus. He is spending it, said Elias Hollis, because he has none of his own, and because a man who has borrowed against a title he has not got yet cannot wait for the 14th of February in any comfort at all. And on the 24th Elias Hollis put on his good coat and went into Heatheridge on the carrier's cart by himself, having refused all offers of company, to be examined on oath by Sir Talbot's attorney as to the treatment of the patient. He was gone 11 hours. He came back at 9 at night, felt his way to his own stool, and asked for tea. "Well," said Maud, "they kept me 3 hours." "What did they ask you?" "Everything they could think of, and one thing they should not have thought of." The old man wrapped both hands round the cup. "The gentleman asked me how I could know what I was doing, being blind. He asked it 4 different ways, and he was very civil about it every time. And the third time I said, 'Sir, I have set 1100 bones in the dark, and you have set none in the light, and if you are ever thrown from a horse on the Heatheridge road, I hope for your sake that the nearest house is mine.'" Elias drank his tea. The clerk had to be spoken to. He was writing it down and laughing at the same time, and he made a blot. Thaddeus lay in the dark that night and looked at the heron-shaped smoke stain, and thought about 1100 bones, and about 11 men and 4 women in the carrier's cart, and about how none of them owed him anything at all. Lady Arabella wrote on the 27th of January. It was 3 pages, and it was very well done. She had been prevented. She had been ill. She had been given to understand, by those in whom she reposed the fullest confidence, that he was gone, and the shock of it had made her wretched all winter. She had wept when the letter came from the steward. She had been forbidden by her father to travel in such weather. She trusted that when they met all should be as it was, and that he would not permit strangers to prejudice him against those who had loved him longest. There was one line in the middle of the 2nd page. "I hear you are still in that dreadful place. I do beg you, my dear Thaddeus, to consider how it looks." He read it twice and put it on the fire, and Maud, who was mending at the table and had not asked a single question, said nothing whatever and went on mending. The attorney's letter came on the 29th and was much shorter. "Your Grace must be at Fenmere. I say this as plainly as I can. The strongest part of their case is a picture, and the picture is of a duke lying in a fen cottage while his estate goes ungoverned. Every day your Grace remains at Saints' Drove is a day of their evidence, and every day your Grace is seen at Fenmere, in the estate room at the audit, in the parish church, on your own feet, before witnesses, is a day of ours. The carriage should come out on the 1st of February. I beg your Grace will not argue with me about this." Thaddeus put the letter down on the blanket. The fire was drawing. There was frost on the inside of the window in the shape of a fern. Elias was asleep in the chair with his mouth open, and Maud was at the dresser with her back to him, cutting bread, in the same brown stuff gown she had worn every day since the 3rd of November, and the whole kitchen smelled of tallow and eel smoke and wet wool. 9,000 acres, 40 rooms. 200 years of pictures. He discovered, sitting up on his elbows in a toll house at Saints' Drove, that he did not want to go home in the least. Not the step. "Take the step slowly, or you will be on your face in my garden, and I shall have to fetch 3 men. I am taking it slowly." "You are taking it like a man who thinks nobody is watching," said Maud, "and the whole parish is watching. There is a boy up that willow." On the 31st of January, at 4 in the afternoon, the Duke of Fenmere walked out of the toll house at Saints' Drove on 2 sticks, down the step, along the 11 yards of brick path, and through his own toll gate, and it took him 6 minutes, and when he got there he stood holding the gate post and looked at the fen. He had ridden across it 100 times. He had never once looked at it. It went out flat and brown and silver to the edge of the world, cut into long straight water with the willows in lines and the sedge going grey-gold and a sky over it the size of an ocean, and the low sun came all the way from Sedgeholt across the flood water in one unbroken sheet. And there was a smell of cold clean water and cut reed, and somewhere out on the mere load a man was singing at a punt. "Well," said Maud beside him, "there it is. You own the whole of it. I have never seen it before. You have ridden through it since you were a boy." "I have ridden through it," said Thaddeus, on the way to somewhere else. The board was on the gatepost by his hand, painted and repainted, the letters gone soft at the edges, the tolls fixed by the commissioners, a saddle horse a penny, a carriage and pair 6pence. 6pence, he said. "Owing," said Maud. They stood there a while. The sun went down the last of the way, and the sheet of water on the fen went from gold to pewter to nothing at all, and it got cold very quickly, and neither of them mentioned it. Maud, On the night of the flood I asked you why you did not get in the punt, and you said, ask me in the spring. I did. It is nearly February. February is not the spring, said Maud Hollis. February is the worst month there is. That is not an answer either. No. She looked out at the fen with her arms folded into her shawl. Your Grace, if I tell you now, you will do something about it inside the week, because you are a man who does things about things, and the doing of it will be worth a great deal of money and nothing else, and I should never afterwards know which of the two it was. So no. Not in February, and not while there is a paper on that mantel with my name on it, and not while you are frightened. I am not frightened. You are terrified, said Maud, and you have a right to be, and I would think a good deal less of you if you were not. Come in before you take cold. You are going home on Tuesday. They went to Fenmere on the 2nd of February in a carriage with the seat taken out and the door of the back kitchen laid along it, which the Fenmere coachman had never in his life been asked to do and did without a word. And Elias Hollis came because the leg was not finished with, and Maud Hollis came because her father did. She stood in the great hall of Fenmere for the first time with her box in her own hand, and looked up at the ceiling for a long moment. Well, she said, you will want a great many candles. The house was in black. The hatchment was still up over the door. Thaddeus had it down within the hour, and it was carried through the hall by 2 footmen with the whole household standing about pretending to be busy. And somewhere at the back of them somebody made a noise that was half a cheer and got no further, and the steward turned round with his eyes shining and said, Beg pardon, Your Grace, to nobody in particular. The household did not know what to do with her, and she settled the question in a single morning. She would not be waited on. She would not sit in the drawing-room. She would take her meals with her father in the steward's parlour, and she would be obliged for the key of the still room and the loan of a needle. Miss Hollis is a guest in this house, said Thaddeus. Miss Hollis is a witness in a cause, said Maud, and on the 15th of February she may be a guest if she is asked. Until then she will be exactly where anybody who inquires can be told she was, and doing exactly what anybody who inquires can be told she did. He governed for 12 days. He had never done it before in his life. He sat in the estate room from 9 until 4 with his leg on a stool and the books in front of him and the steward at his elbow, and he stopped the beach sail and paid the forfeit out of his own pocket, and took back the 4 outdoor men and paid them their fortnight, and went through the rents parish by parish with a man who had been waiting 9 years for somebody to ask him a question. He signed nothing without reading it. He read the stopping up order for Saints drove twice and put it in the fire himself with the tongs and watched it go. They put Elias Hollis in the steward's parlour on the ground floor with a fire and a bed brought down, because he would not go up a strange staircase and said so once flatly, and was not argued with. Thaddeus found him there on the 6th, sitting by the window with the sun on his face. You have a great many clocks in this house, sir. 11. 14, said Elias. There is one in the passage behind me that wants regulating. It gains 4 minutes in the day. He turned his head. Sit down. You have been in that doorway a minute and a half working yourself up to something. Thaddeus sat down. I want to ask you for something. Ask it after the 14th. Everybody in this county says that to me, because it is sense. The old man folded his hands. But I will give you one thing now, since you are here, and since I dare say I shall not have the chance to say it comfortably again. He paused. Do not offer my daughter money, sir. I know what you mean by it. You mean to be just. When this is over you will want to set it right, a sum, a settlement, a paper with a figure written on it, because that is what your sort does, and there is nothing wicked in it. Elias turned his blind face towards the window. But she has been offered money by your cousin, in her own kitchen, for her oath, and by your attorney for her trouble, and it will come at her from a 3rd quarter before this is finished. I feel it the way I feel weather in my knee. The hands came apart. If ever you put money into that woman's hand in front of other people, sir, you will not get her back. Not in a year and not in 10. I tell you now because you are fond of her, and because you are a fool about people, and you have been a fool about people since you were 23. How do you know I was a fool at 23? Everybody is, said Elias Hollis. He went to church at Wickend on the 8th of February, and walked in on 2 sticks and up the aisle in front of the whole parish, slowly at 11:15, and stood through the psalm. And on the 9th he took Maud Hollis to the glass house. It stood at the end of the walled garden, 60 feet of it, and it had not been heated in 11 years, and half the glass was gone, and there was a fig gone wild through the roof. "My mother built this," he said. "She had vines and a peach house and something she called a stove pipe that never worked. I told you about it once, and you will not remember. On the night of the flood," said Maud. "You talked about it for half an hour, and you were not making a great deal of sense. You remember?" "I remember all of it," she said. "I was awake." He stood in the doorway of a ruined glasshouse on a February afternoon with the light coming green through the dirty panes, and looked at a woman in a brown stuff gown with her hair coming out of its pins, and understood, with the completeness of a thing that has been true for some time, exactly what had happened to him. "Maud, Grace, if a man in this county wished to say something to you," said Thaddeus, "that he had no business saying 5 days before he is to be tried for a lunatic, when should he say it?" Maud Hollis looked at the fig. "After," she said. After the 14th. When there is nothing in it for either of us, and nobody can say I had it out of you while you were on your back with a fever." She put a hand out and touched the frame of the door, and did not look at him. "And I will tell you what I said I would tell you in the spring, and you may have the whole of it, and then you may say your thing or not say it. That is a long 5 days." "It is a very long 5 days," said Maud, and turned round, and for the first time since the 3rd of November she was not being anybody's nurse or anybody's witness or anybody's toll-keeper, and she looked at him straight, and there was a good deal in her face. He put out his hand and she gave him hers, and he held it, a hard, dry, scrubbed hand with 2 chilblains on it and a scar across the palm from the shears, and neither of them said anything at all for a while, and the green light came down through the broken roof. Then she took it back and shook out her skirt and said, "Your mother's glass house wants 900 panes and a new stove, and I have counted, and it is a wicked waste of money, and you are going to do it." "I am going to do it." "Yes," said Maud. "Well." They came back up the walled garden path together, not touching, at the pace of a man on 2 sticks, and turned the corner by the yew hedge into the sight of the front of the house. There was a travelling carriage at the door with 4 horses and a mountain of boxes, and a footman handing down a lady in a plum-coloured pelisse, and a stout gentleman behind her already going up the steps as though he had bought them. "Thaddeus," cried Lady Arabella, across 60 feet of gravel, with her arms out and her face radiant. "Oh, my dearest, they told me you were walking, and I would not believe it. You will dine with us tomorrow, both of you. I am not going to argue about it. You are going to lose it," said Maud. "Then I shall lose it standing up," said Thaddeus. "There are 18 people coming into this house who have spent the winter reading a paragraph in a newspaper about a blind man and his daughter, and they are going to sit down at my table with the pair of you and look at you and be answered." Elias Hollis said from his chair, "Do not do it, sir." "Why not?" "Because you are doing it for the pleasure of it," said the old man, "and a thing done for the pleasure of it always wants paying for at the far end." He did it anyway. He was to think about that for a very long time, that he was warned twice in one room, by both of them, on the 11th of February, and that he had put them at that table with his own hands, because it pleased him to be the sort of man who would. The dinner at Fenmere on the 13th of February was for 20. There were hothouse flowers up from a nurseryman at Heatheridge, and the beeswax candles that had not been out of the store since his father's funeral, and the whole of the long room smelled of wax and forced hyacinth and hot silver. Lady Arabella sat at his right hand. She had been 3 days in the house, and she had done a great deal of work in them. She had wept, prettily and briefly, over the hatchment. She had gone through the state-rooms with the housekeeper. She had told 4 separate people in Thaddeus's hearing that he had been most wonderfully nursed by 2 of his own cottagers, in a tone that put the whole thing in a glass case and labelled it. Her father had twice raised the marriage settlement, once at breakfast and once, with more weight, in the estate room. Sign it before the 14th Duke. Nothing in this world says a man is in his senses like a man about to be married. Maud sat far down on the left, between the rector of Sedgeholt and a deaf lady from Heatheridge, in a grey gown Thaddeus had never seen and understood at once she had made herself, and Elias sat opposite her with his plate arranged by his daughter's hand before he came in, and ate very neatly, and talked to a farmer's wife about bees for 20 minutes and made her laugh 3 times. It went well for an hour and 10 minutes. Thaddeus knew afterwards exactly when it turned. It turned at the second course, when the deaf lady from Heatheridge asked Maud, loudly and quite kindly, what a toll house was like inside, and Maud told her, 3 rooms, a brick floor, £11 a year, in the same flat clear voice she used for everything, and half the table stopped talking to listen, and liked her. And there was a small warm silence of the kind that a party remembers afterwards as the best part of the evening, and Lady Arabella, who was not a stupid woman, felt the room move. "How very interesting," she said, "and how good you have been. Thaddeus, do you know, I do not think I've ever thanked Miss Hollis properly." She turned down the table with her whole charming face. "You must have been quite worn out, my dear. 11 weeks. Nursing and cooking and writing all his letters for him with your own hand, and in such a place, with nobody to help you and nobody to see. There was my father. Of course, your father." A little pause, beautifully judged. "And no one else at all." Well, she looked back at Thaddeus and put her hand on the cloth near his. "It is an extraordinary devotion. I have said so to everybody. I have said, whatever the world may think of it, and the world will think what it likes, my dear. It always does. The woman must have wanted something very much indeed." She smiled at Maud with great sweetness. "What did you ask him for, Miss Hollis?" The table went quiet, and Thaddeus, who had in his pocket a note in his own attorney's hand that said the 6th particular is the dangerous one. "They will say your Grace has made extravagant promises to persons in that house, and we must be able to show a plain hired relation and nothing else," heard himself answer for her. "Nothing," he said. "She asked for nothing. She has been paid." Somebody laughed, in relief, the way a table does. He could have stopped there. He has never been able to explain to himself why he did not stop there. Perhaps because Arabella's eyebrows went up 1/16 of an inch. Perhaps because the rector of Sedgeholt was looking at him. Perhaps only because he was a frightened man 12 hours from a jury of 23. "My pocket-book," he said to the steward at his elbow. It came. He counted out £50 in notes on the cloth beside his plate, in front of 18 people and 4 servants, and folded them once and held them out. "Take these down to Miss Hollis, if you please. It is a hired service, and it will be paid for like one, and I will have no more said about it at my table." The room was silent all the way down its length, while the steward carried £50 22 feet. Maud Hollis looked at the notes on the salver for a moment. Then she took them and put them in her lap, and said quite clearly, so that everybody heard, "Thank you, Your Grace." She turned to the deaf lady from Heatheridge and asked, in the same voice, for the loan of a pencil. And the deaf lady, who had not followed any of it, gave her one out of her reticule and was thanked for it. Maud turned over a card that lay by her plate and wrote 3 lines on the back of it and blew on it and gave it to the steward. "Would you carry that back to his Grace, please? It is a receipt, he will want one." Then she got up. "Father." "Yes," said Elias Hollis. She went round the end of the table and put his hand through her arm, and the 2 of them walked the length of the long room at the old man's pace, which is slow, past every one of those 18 people, and Elias said nothing at all, and did not turn his blind face towards the head of the table, and that was very much worse than anything he could have said. At the door Maud stopped. "Your Grace," she said, "Lady Arabella's father put a question to you at breakfast this morning, and you have not answered it, and he is a guest in your house, and it is not civil. I should answer it tonight." And they went out. Thaddeus sat at the head of his own table with a card in his hand. Received of his Grace the Duke of Fenmere the sum of £50, being payment in full for services rendered at the toll house at Saints Drove between the 3rd of November and the 2nd of February, no other consideration having been asked, offered, or received. M. Hollis. Somebody, somewhere down the table, said what a very superior sort of person, and somebody else said it must be a great relief. and the dinner at Fenmere went on for 2 hours and 40 minutes more, and the Duke of Fenmere sat through the whole of it, and afterwards could not have told anybody one thing that was said. The rector of Sedgeholt did not stay for tea. He came up to Thaddeus in the hall with his hat already in his hand. "You will excuse me, Duke. It is 11 miles and my horse is old. You are angry with me." "I am a magistrate," said the rector, "and as it happens I sit beside the commissioner at Heatheridge on Thursday, and I had rather not be angry with anybody tonight." He put his hat on. "I will say one thing and then go, and you may take it as a clergyman's or as a neighbour's, whichever you like. I wrote to that commissioner in January on your behalf. I said, among other things, that a man's understanding may be fairly judged by whether he knows what he owes and to whom." He looked at Thaddeus steadily. "I posted it on the 20th. I have thought about that sentence a good deal in the last half hour. Good night, Duke." He went down to the steward's parlour at midnight on his stick. The fire was banked. The bed had been stripped and folded. The instrument chest was gone off the table and the good coat was gone off the door, and there was nothing in the room at all except a smell of tallow that did not belong in that house. He found the coachman in the stable yard at 1 in the morning putting up the gig. "You took them?" "I did, your grace, without leave." "Without leave," the man agreed and went on with the strap. "Mr. Hollis asked me at the yard door whether I'd take him and his daughter as far as they wanted to go, and I said I would, and I did, and I'd do it again in the morning, and your grace may have my place for it tonight if you want it." Thaddeus stood in the cold with his hand on the wheel. "Where did you set them down?" "Old gentleman at the toll house," said the coachman. "Miss Hollis wouldn't be set down there. She'd her box with her and her father's coat over her arm, and she asked me to carry her on into Heatheridge and put her at the coach office, and she'd not say another word the whole 11 miles. He straightened up. "She's gone in on her own, your grace. 10 hours before they want her." Thaddeus stood in the yard until the coachman had gone in. £50. He had counted onto a tablecloth with his own hands, 22 feet from a woman who had sat 6 hours in cold flood water on a staircase, so that his feet should stay dry. And he had done it because an attorney had sent him a note about a particular, and he had done it in front of 18 people, and she had thanked him for it. "Do not offer my daughter money." He ordered the horses at 1:30, and then stood in his own hall with his stick in his hand and did not go, because it was 11 miles of black road, and because there was nothing whatever a man could say at the door of a coach office at 3 in the morning that would not have made it worse. It was, he decided long afterwards, the only sensible thing he did in the whole of that winter. It did not feel like it at the time. "Your grace cannot be in the hall while their witnesses are examined. I am sorry. It is my advice and I will give it to you again at the door." "Why?" "Because you have a fever scar and a stick and a jury of 23 men who have been told for 2 months that you are wandering," said the attorney, "and if you so much as frown at the wrong moment, their counsel will turn round and point at you. You will wait in the room across the passage and I will send for you at 2. The Sessions House at Heatheridge has 11 steps up from the street. Thaddeus did them on his own on the 14th of February, in a hard white frost, with 2 footmen behind him who had been told to keep their hands to themselves and were suffering for it, and it took him 19 minutes. And by the time he was at the top, the whole of the street had stopped to watch, and a man selling hot chestnuts had taken his hat off. He did not go to the room across the passage. He went in at the back of the hall, into the crowd standing against the wall by the doors, among farmers and drovers and a woman with a basket of eggs, and nobody turned round, because there were 11 rows of standing men in front of him, and every one of them was looking the other way. Maud Hollis was on her feet at the far end being sworn. She had on the grey gown she had made herself. She had a bonnet he had never seen, and she had her hands folded in front of her, and she looked exactly as she looked at 4 in the morning with a basin, entirely and impersonally attentive, as though the whole business were a job of work that had come in. The petitioner's counsel was a big pleasant man with a voice like a warm bath. "You are Maud Hollis?" "I am." "Of the toll house at Saint's Drove, in the parish of Wickend?" "Yes." "Unmarried?" "Your age?" 27. "And your circumstances, Miss Hollis?" "What does the toll house bring in a year?" £11 in a good year, said Maud. 8 in a bad one. There have been 3 bad ones. £8. He let it lie on the floor of the hall for a moment. And on the 3rd of November last, His Grace the Duke of Fenmere was carried into that house, a nobleman with 9,000 acres, and remained under your roof for 11 weeks. 13 weeks. 13. Thank you. Alone with you and your father. Alone with my father and me and about 40 other people, said Maud, at one time or another over 13 weeks, in a 2-roomed house with a window on a public road. I could give the court their names if it wants them. It would take some time. There was a small movement in the hall. Counsel smiled at her. You wrote his letters. I did. He could not hold a pen. You wrote every letter that went out in his name from the 3rd of November to the 2nd of February. Yes. So that everything that county has heard from the Duke of Fenmere this winter has come out of your hand. Out of my hand and out of his mouth, said Maud. They are not the same thing, and I hope the court will keep them apart, because I have taken a great deal of trouble to. Miss Hollis. Counsel put down his brief and became fatherly. You are not on trial here. Nobody in this room thinks ill of you. You have done a great kindness, and it has cost you a great deal, and everybody here knows it. I want you only to tell these gentlemen the truth about what you saw. During the fever, during those 11 days, was His Grace in his right mind? No. Thank you. He had a fever of 103 and a broken thigh, and no Lord Arnhem in the house after the 5th day, said Maud. He was not in his right mind on the 9th of November, and he was not in his right mind on the 10th, and by the 14th he was, and I can tell the court the hour, because it is written down. Written down. I have it here. She took a book out from under her arm. It was a common ruled day book with a marbled cover, and it had been rained on. That is not in your deposition. It is not. Your clerk did not ask me for it, and I did not think of offering it, and I have thought of very little else since. She held it up. It is the treatment book. My father dictated it, and I wrote it. Every day since the 3rd of November, 4 and 5 times a day. The hour, the pulse, the state of the wound, the dose, and what was said. It is what he has kept at sea and afterwards for 40 years, and he would not have it left off for anybody. What was said, what the patient said. He taught me to put it in, because a man's talk tells you more than his tongue does. She opened it. The 9th of November, 3 in the morning. Pulse 124. Talking of a rail on a horse, not sensible, would not be quieted. The 14th of November, 7 in the morning. Pulse 88. Asked what day it was for food, asked whether anyone had come, and was told no, and said very well, and asked for the toll book to see what the road had taken that week. Maud looked up. That is a man in his senses, sir. That is a landlord. The hall made a noise. The commissioner said, quiet there. Counsel changed his ground. You have been very generously treated by the Duke. I have been paid by him. Indeed you have. Last night, at Fenmere at his own table, before 18 persons of this county, £50. Yes, £50, said counsel to the jury, being rather more than 6 years of this witness's income. Yes, said Maud, and a very natural gratitude it must have inspired. You may have it back. There was a pause of about 2 seconds. I beg your pardon? You may have it back, or the court may, or he may. I do not much mind which. She took a paper packet out of her pocket and put on the ledge in front of her. There are £45 9 shillings in that paper in the same notes, and I should be obliged if the clerk would count them. And here is what is wanting. She put a second, smaller paper beside it. The Heatheridge coach from Wick End Cross, 4 shillings. A bed at the Swan last night and this morning, 3 shillings and 6pence. An attorney's clerk to write my deposition out fair, because my own hand is in question in this cause, and I would not have it said I wrote it myself, £1 1. Pair of gloves, 2 shillings, my own not being fit to be seen in a public court. £2 10 shillings left with my father, he being blind and alone in the house since last night and needing somebody found to sit with him. She set the pencil down. £4 11 shillings. It is all itemized, and I will swear to every line of it. And if the court thinks any of it extravagant, I will make it good out of the toll. The big pleasant man stood quite still. You mean the court to believe that you did not want the money? I mean the court to believe what I have written down, said Maud Hollis. I wanted it very much indeed, sir. There is a hole in my roof and my father wants a warm room. I have not spent a penny of it that was not spent getting myself into this hole to answer your questions, and I'm not going to pretend to be above money in front of 23 men who work for theirs. But it was given to me across a dinner table in front of 18 people to prove something about him, and I will not keep it, and that is the whole of it, and you may make what you can of it. He made what he could of it for 11 minutes more. He asked her what she had hoped for, 13 weeks alone in a house with a single gentleman of great fortune. He asked her whether promises had been made. He asked her 3 separate ways whether she expected to be the Duchess of Fenmere. No, said Maud, you have never thought of it. I have thought of it, she said. I am 27 and I am not a stone. I have thought of it in the way a person thinks of a thing she has read about in a book, and then I have got up and done the 4 o'clock strapping. And I would ask the court to notice that the strapping got done every night for 13 weeks, which is the only part of this that any of you can check. At the back of the hall in the crowd by the doors, with his hand flat against the wall, the Duke of Fenmere found that he could not see very well. His own counsel got up at 12:30 and asked her 4 questions, and she was 10 minutes on the first one, and the hall did not move. She told them about the 3rd of November, the horses in the dike, the door off the hinges, what Dr. Peel had said in what words, standing where, what Sir Talbot had said at the door about the coroner, the hours, the mud in the wound, her father's hands. She told them about the flood, and the punt and getting the door up onto the table with a plank and a nail keg, and she told it flatly as a series of things done, and it was the flatness that finished it, because there was not one man on that jury who did not know exactly what 4 foot of fen water does to a house. Miss Hollis, said his counsel, is there anything else within your knowledge that this court ought to have? Yes, said Maud, and it is not in my deposition, and I want to say why before I say what, because it looks very bad and I know it looks very bad. Say it as you please. On the morning of the 4th of November, at first light, I went down the drove to the dike where the carriage was, to see whether the horses were living and to cut them out if they were not. They were not. She had her hands folded again. The near wheel horse was on the far bank with the harness on him. I cut the harness off him with my father's shears, and the near side trace was cut. The hall went very quiet, cut 2/3 through from the inside with a knife and torn the rest of the way, said Maud Hollis. It is a leather trace 1.5 inches thick, and it does not part on a rail. I have had it in my father's tool chest at Saint's Drove in a sack since that morning, and it has not been out of the chest, and my father can swear to the day it went in because he heard the lid. Why in God's name did you not speak of it? Because I am a toll-keeper's daughter, said Maud, and the only people I could have told were the family that had ridden away, and the coroner they had promised me, and a physician who had written mortification in his book before he looked at the leg. I had a duke on a kitchen door who could not sit up and a blind man of 71, and I judged that the sack was safer shut. If that was wrong, it was wrong, and I have had 14 weeks of it, and I will answer for it. But I am asked in this hall today whether that gentleman is in his right mind, and I say he is, and I say further that somebody in this cause has an interest in his not being anything at all, and it is time the sack was opened by somebody with the right to open it. The commissioner took off his spectacles. Where is the chest? At Saint's Drove, sir, 11 miles, and my father is sitting by it. Mr. Rector, said the commissioner to the magistrate on his left, you will be good enough to send 2 constables for it now, and to go with them yourself. They found the Duke of Fenmere of sound mind at 20 minutes past 4, and it took the jury 9 minutes, and there was such a noise in the Sessions House at Hetheridge that the commissioner gave up trying to stop it and sat back and let it run. Of Dr. Peel's affidavit he said only that it would be sent, with the whole of the papers, to a quarter where such affidavits are read with attention, and Dr. Peel had left the hall by the side door before he finished the sentence. Thaddeus stayed where he was, at the back by the doors in the crowd. She never once looked for him. He watched her the whole of the afternoon, and she never looked up at the doors, not when the jury came back, not when the hall shouted, not when the commissioner thanked her from the bench in 11 words that were repeated in that county for 30 years. And as she gathered her book and her bonnet and turned to come down, the big pleasant man from London, who had lost, and was a decent enough man on his own account, and had been thinking about it, asked her one more question, out of his brief and out of the record. "Miss Hollis, will you tell me why you stayed?" Maud Hollis stopped with her hand on the rail. "Because of a letter, sir," she said. "What that?" said Maud. "Is not this court's business?" and came down the steps. "She is at the gate," said Elias Hollis. "There is a lime cart due, and she will not leave the road for anybody." "Sit down, sir. You are breathing like a bellows, and I can hear the stick shaking. I walked from the turn." "You walked half a mile on that leg 3 days after 11 steps at Heatheridge," said the old man, "and if you do it again this month I shall not answer for the hip. Sit down." Thaddeus sat down on the stool by the fire in the kitchen at Saint's Drove, where he had lain on a door for 13 weeks, and looked at the smoke stain shaped like heron, and found that his eyes were stinging, and put it down to the tallow. The 17th of February. A thaw had come in on the 15th, and the fen was running everywhere, and the whole drove smelled of wet earth for the first time since November. They had taken Sir Talbot on the 16th. The trace went from the tool chest to the rector of Sedgeholt to the magistrate's clerk to a saddler at Heatheridge who gave his opinion in 4 sentences and would not be shaken out of it by anybody, and on the 16th a groom in Sir Talbot's service. Being told what the saddler had said and what it would mean for the man who had held the knife, sat down and talked for 2 hours. There was a great deal of it. There was also, when the attorneys got into it, £14,000 borrowed in London against an expectation, at a rate that would have frightened a horse. He was committed to the Lent Assizes at Heatheridge on the 9th of March. "Does she know?" said Thaddeus. "The whole fen knows. The ill man was here at 6. And she said, 'That poor stupid man,' and went out to the gate," said Elias. "She has not said another word about it, and she will not. She is not a woman who enjoys things." The fire ticked. Out on the drove a cart went by, and there was the sound of the gate and a coin and 2 voices, one of them hers. "Mr. Hollis." On the 14th she was asked why she stayed. "I was told." She said, "Because of a letter." She did. "I have asked her. She told me to ask you." Elias Hollis sat quite still for a moment. Then he got up and crossed his own kitchen without a hand out, 11 paces, and knelt down at the chest under the window and put back the lid. He did not take out an instrument. He put 2 fingers up under the lip of the lid itself, where a strip of wood had been nailed across the inside, and drew out a flat packet in oilskin. "There," he said, 11 years under that lid. Read it out. I know the whole of it by heart, and I should like to hear it in your voice." It was 1 sheet, folded in 3, worn through at the folds and mended twice with paste. The ink had gone brown, was in a clerk's hand and on Fenmere paper, and it was dated the 14th of June, 11 years before. Thaddeus read it aloud in the kitchen at Saint's Drove. His Grace the Duke of Fenmere, being informed of the misfortune of Elias Hollis, late of the Fenmere clay diggings at Sedgeholt, who was deprived of his sight by a shot fired in the estate's service on the 6th day of June, is pleased to grant unto the said Elias Hollis, and unto his daughter Maud Hollis, the toll house at Saint's Drove with the keeping of the Drove gate and the tolls thereof, for the term of their 2 lives, free of rent and of all charge. And directs that no order of any kind touching the said Drove shall be made without his Grace's own hand to it. And at the foot of the sheet, in a large, careless, upright scrawl that had not changed since Eton, Fenmere. The room went a long way off. "That is my hand," said Thaddeus. "It is." "I have no recollection of it." "No," said Elias Hollis, "I did not suppose you had." "Sir, I was 28. It was my 3rd week in the title. My father's steward brought me the letter book every morning for a month, and I signed whatever was on the top of it, 40 papers at a sitting standing up, with my gloves on. He heard his own voice going, "I never read it. I did not know your name. I did not know there were clay diggings at Sedgeholt until this January." "I know," said Elias. "You know?" "The paper came out to us at 11 in the morning on the 14th of June, said the old man, "and the overseers had been in this parish since 8 with a cart." Because there was a blind man and a girl of 16 and no living, and the house at Heatheridge was where we were going, and everybody knew it, and two of them had already looked over our furniture. He sat down on the edge of the chest. I had that letter in my hands within a minute of its coming. The paste on the folds is because I wore it out, and I will tell you what I have never told my daughter, and what I do not intend to tell her, and you may do as you think right about it afterwards. He turned his blind face up. It was folded before the ink was dry. My wife said so at the time, and she had been in service and knew what a signature looks like when a man has read the thing under it. I have known since that morning that whoever signed it never read a word. Thaddeus put his hand over his mouth, and Maud. Maud was 16, said Elias Hollis. Maud has believed for 11 years that a great gentleman she had never seen was told about a blind clay digger at Sedgeholt, and sat down and did something about it inside 8 days. She put that letter under the lid herself. She takes it out at Michaelmas when the tolls are counted, and she has done it every year since. He said the next thing quite gently. She has known your hand since she was 16. She wrote 30 letters for you in November, and she was looking at that signature at the bottom of every one of them. The gate, the lime cart going on, her voice saying something to the carter about his mare's off for. That is why she did not get into the punt, said Thaddeus. That is why she did not get into the punt. It was not a kindness, it was carelessness. It was the same carelessness that let a rail rot on my own causeway for 8 months. Yes, said Elias Hollis. It was both. That is generally how it is with your sort, sir, and I have had 11 dry winters out of it, and my daughter has had a trade and a roof and her own name on a tall board, and I am not going to stand in my own kitchen and call it nothing. But you asked me why she stayed, and I have told you, and now you know something she does not, and it is yours to carry. He went back to Fenmere that afternoon and had the letter book of that year brought up out of the muniment room. It was there. The 14th of June. 41 entries in the clerk's list, and the 31st of them, between a lease at Wick End and an order for gravel, was Grant, Toll House, Saints Drove Hollis, 2 lives. He sat with it open on his knee for a long time. Lady Arabella and her father had gone from Fenmere on the 15th at 8 in the morning, without asking to see him. She wrote from Heatheridge 2 days later. It was 1 page this time, and a great deal less well done. And the substance of it was that upon mature reflection she could not think it right to enter a family so unhappily circumstanced, and that she trusted he would do her the justice of remembering that she had never been anything but candid with him. Thaddeus read it standing in his own hall, and found that the only thing he felt was a mild and distant gratitude to the lady for sparing him the writing of it himself, and he put it in his coat pocket and forgot it there, and it went to the wash on Monday. Then he sent for the steward and asked for the sealed paper that had come back from the Toll House on the 16th, and opened it, and counted £45 9 shillings in notes, and read, in the small round careful hand he had watched write 6 letters by candlelight in a fen kitchen, an account of £4 11 shillings, itemised with a note at the bottom. If his Grace will not have it back, it should go to the Wick End Chapel Roof Fund, which is short by £11, and not to me H. And under that, added later, in pencil, and not meant for him at all, course. Not sorry I went. He found the December letter too, in his attorney's report, an entry in a daybook initialed and dated, that upon the 11th of December Miss Maud Hollis of Saints Drove had refused a bank order for £100, and had required the refusal to be written down in the attorney's presence. Thaddeus of Fenmere sat in his own estate room among his own papers, and understood, at 39 years of age, that he had spent 13 weeks being kept alive by a woman who had every reason on earth to refuse him and 1 reason to stay, and that the 1 reason was a paper he had signed with his gloves on without reading it, and that at the end of the 13 weeks he had put £50 into her hand across a dinner table to prove to 18 strangers that she was hired. He went out to Saints Drove again on the 19th and found her at the gate in the rain with the toll book under her arm. Miss Hollis, your Grace, my cousin comes up at Heatheridge on the 9th of March, so I hear. I am going to give evidence, said Thaddeus, and when I have given it, I am going to say a good deal more than I am asked, front of the whole of that county, and about a third of it will be about a letter dated the 14th of June 11 years ago. He stood in the rain and looked at her. You are not in that cause and nobody can compel you, and I am not going to. But I would take it very kindly if you were sitting where you could hear it. Maud Hollis looked at him for a long moment with the rain coming off the brim of her bonnet. What is in the letter that I do not know? She said. I never read it, said Thaddeus. The rain came off the brim of her bonnet and off the top rail of the gate and off the board with the tolls on it, and Maud Hollis stood in the middle of the drove and did not say anything for a long time. Say it again. I signed 41 papers on the 14th of June in the year I came into the title. I signed them standing up, in my gloves, out of the letter book, without reading one of them. Your father's grant was the 31st. He made himself go on. I did not know his name. I did not know there were clay diggings at Sedgeholt. I have never in my life had a kind thought about your family, Miss Hollis, because until the 3rd of November I did not know that your family existed. My father knew, she said. Did he not? He has known since the day it came. Yes, she turned her face out towards the fen. Yes, he would. He is never wrong about anything. Maud, do not. She put her hand up once and put it down again. It hurts a good deal more than I expected, and I would rather have had it in a public hall along with everybody else, and I am going to be very poor company for about a week. She wiped the rain off her face with the back of her wrist. And then I shall be perfectly reasonable about it, because the roof is still on the house and my father still has his 11 dry winters, and a thing does not stop having happened because the man who did it was not attending. That is more generous than I can bear. It is not generous at all. It is only true, and I would be obliged if you would stop looking at me like that. She opened the toll book and shut it again for something to do with her hands. The 9th of March. Yes, I will come, said Maud Hollis. Not for you. There will be 11 men and 4 women out of Wick End in that hall who put by the carrier's money for me in January, and I'm not going to let them sit through it on their own. Sir Talbot came up at the Lent Assizes at Hetheridge on the 9th of March, and it was over before 4 o'clock. The groom gave his evidence in a voice that could hardly be heard and did not once lift his head. The saddler from Hetheridge gave his in 4 sentences and could not be moved from them by anything counsel could think of. There was the trace itself on the table in front of the judge all day, black and stiff, with the cut showing. There were the London bonds, and £14,000 borrowed against an expectation, and a date on the borrowing that was 3 weeks before the 3rd of November. Thaddeus gave his own evidence for 11 minutes and was not cross-examined at all. The jury were out for half an hour. Sir Talbot heard the verdict standing very straight in a good coat, and was sentenced to be transported for the term of his natural life, and was taken down. And Thaddeus, who had known him since they were both 6 years old, found that what he chiefly felt was a kind of exhausted grief, and no satisfaction whatever. The drainage commissioners for the mere load level sat in the same building at 6 that evening, upon the petition for the stopping up of Saints' Drove, and half the county stayed for it, because half the county had nowhere else to be, and had never in its life been so entertained. The Duke of Fenmere asked leave to be heard. He came up on his stick to the table with a sheet of paper in his hand, and stood, and did not sit when the chairman offered him a chair. The petition is withdrawn, he said. It was drawn in my name, and it was never in my hand, and I have burnt the engrossment. There will be no order touching that drove while I live, and I will tell this meeting why, and it will take rather longer than the business requires, and I ask the chairman's patience. Take your time, Duke, said the chairman. This is a letter dated the 14th of June 11 years ago, said Thaddeus, out of my own estate. I will read it. He read it. Every word slowly to the end, and at the end of it he read out the last clause twice, that no order of any kind touching the said drove shall be made without his Grace's own hand to it, and then the signature, which was his own. The hall was entirely still. Everybody in this room will suppose that I remember signing that, he said. I do not. I signed 41 papers that morning out of the letter book, standing up with my gloves on, in my 3rd week as the Duke of Fenmere, and that grant was the 31st of them, and I never read one line of it. I did not know Elias Hollis's name. I did not know that a man had been blinded at my own clay diggings 8 days before. The parish cart was at his door that morning for the workhouse at Hetheridge, and it went away empty because of a paper that I put my name to by accident. Somewhere at the back a man said something and was hushed. On the 3rd of November my carriage went off my own causeway at a rail that had been reported rotten to my estate twice, and I was carried into that tall house, and I was left there for dead by my own blood and by my own physician. I was kept alive for 13 weeks by Elias Hollis, who is blind, and by his daughter, who is 27 and has £8 a year. Thaddeus put the letter down on the table. It is the only good thing my family has ever done for those two people, and I did it without knowing, and it came back and saved my life. I would rather this county heard that from me than from anybody else, and I would rather it heard it now, while I am still ashamed enough to say it properly. He took out a second paper. There is one more thing and then I have done. On the 13th of February, at my own table, in front of 18 persons, several of whom are in this hall, I counted out £50 and had it carried down to Miss Hollis, and I said that hers was a hired service and would be paid for as one. I did it to make a point to an attorney about a case. There is no other explanation, and I'm not going to offer this meeting a better one. He unfolded the paper. This is the receipt she wrote for it at my table with a borrowed pencil. And he read that out too, in the flat steady voice of a man reading a bill of lading, all the way down to the last line, no other consideration having been asked, offered, or received, and there was a noise in that hall of a kind that is not often heard at a drainage meeting. £45 and 9 shillings of it came back to me sealed, with an account of the £4.11 she had spent on getting herself into a witness box to speak for me, and a direction that it should go to the Wick End Chapel roof. It has gone to the Wick End Chapel roof, with £200 of mine on top of it, and the chapel may do as it likes about the rest. He folded the paper. The receipt I am keeping. It will hang in the estate room at Fenmere where I do business, and it will hang there after I am dead, and my successors may explain it to their guests as best they can. The chairman of the Mere Load Commissioners cleared his throat twice and could not immediately proceed. The drove and the toll house and the tolls were settled that month upon Elias Hollis and upon Maud Hollis and upon their heirs forever, free of rent, and 100 a year was settled upon Elias for his life, which he accepted after 4 days of argument on the sole condition that it was called a pension for injury received in the estate's service, because that is what it is, sir, and I will not have it called anything prettier. Dr. Peel's name came off the list of the Hetheridge Infirmary in April and off 2 other lists by June, and he went to practice a long way off, and the affidavit followed him. The 11 men and 4 women out of Wick End sat through the whole of the drainage meeting in the 3rd row from the back, and afterwards stood about in the street in the wet for half an hour, not saying much, until the eelman observed that it was a good many miles home and they had all better get on, and they got on. And on the steps of the Sessions House at Hetheridge on the 9th of March, in a thin wet dusk, Maud Hollis was waiting at the bottom with the tall book under her arm. Miss Hollis, your Grace. She opened the book at the ribbon and held it out to him with the pencil. 6pence. Now? You said in the spring, said Maud, and there were snowdrops out at Sedgeholt this morning, and I have carried this entry since the 3rd of November, and I am tired of looking at it. He paid her 6pence on the steps of the Sessions House at Hetheridge, and she wrote paid against it in her small round hand, and drew a line under it and shut the book. There, she said. Now you are a stranger who has paid his toll, and I am a woman who keeps a gate, and there is nothing at all owing between us in either direction. Maud, you had a thing to say to me after the 14th, said Maud Hollis. It is the 9th of March. I have been waiting 3 weeks and a half, and I have run out of patience, and I am standing in a puddle. Marry me, said Thaddeus. That is not a thing to say to a woman in a puddle. It is the only thing I have said in 5 months that I have thought about for more than a minute, he said. Marry me. I am 39, and I am an inch short on one side for the rest of my life, and I shall want a stick to cross a room, and I have 9,000 acres. I have only just begun to learn the names of... and I have done you one great injury in public and one great carelessness 11 years ago, and I am not going to pretend that either of them will stop mattering. Marry me all the same." Maud Hollis stood on the bottom step of the Sessions House at Hetheridge with the toll book under her arm. "Yes," she said, "you have not thought about it." "I have thought about nothing else since the night of the flood," said Maud, "and I have been extremely cross about it for the whole of that time, and I should like it understood that I did not enjoy 1 minute of it." She shifted the book. "There are conditions. Name them. I keep the gate until Michaelmas. It is my quarter, and I am not walking out of it in March and leaving the road to look after itself. 1. My father chooses where he lives, and nobody chooses for him, and if he says the lodge, it is the lodge, and if he says the toll house, he stops in toll house, and you may send a gig for him on Sundays. 2. And I will not be given things. Not a settlement, not a carriage, not a pearl necklace out of a strong room. If you want to spend money on me, you may spend it on the glass house, which is a wicked waste and which I have wanted since the 9th of February. That is 3. There is a 4th, said Maud, and it is the only one that signifies. She looked up at him in the wet dusk. When you are ashamed of something, you will come and say it to me first, in a room with the door shut, before you say it to 18 people at a dinner table. That is the whole of it. I can live with everything else. Yes, said Thaddeus. Then yes, said Maud Hollis, and put the toll book under her arm and took his free hand, and they went down the last step together into the street at the pace of a man on a stick, in front of about 40 people, none of whom said anything at all until they had turned the corner. They were married at Wick End Chapel on the 3rd of May, which is a low white building on a bank with a rush floor and room for 140, and there were 210, and the rest stood in the churchyard in the sun. Elias Hollis walked up with his daughter on his arm and gave her away in a voice that carried to the road. He had had the ale paced out 3 times the day before by himself at 6 in the morning, and would not let anybody help him do it, and he did not put a foot wrong. The eel man gave them a barrel of eels and a copper kettle. The rector of Sedgeholt came over to preach and was very dry and made everybody laugh twice. The Fenmere coachman, who had lost his place for 11 hours in February and got it back with an increase of £30, drove them home and rang the bell himself in the yard. The Hetheridge paper had a paragraph. It was 7 lines long and there was not a word wrong in it, and Maud cut it out and put it behind the tea canister on the mantel of the estate room, which was where the receipts went. The county called, all of it, in the first 3 weeks, including every one of the 18 who had sat at that table on the 13th of February, and the Duchess of Fenmere received them in the small drawing room with the doors open onto the garden, and was perfectly civil to every one of them, and never once mentioned it, and never once allowed anybody else to mention it either. You might have made them squirm, said Thaddeus, after the 4th afternoon of it. I might. You did not. No. Maud squared the cards on the tray. I have been talked of in a newspaper with my age printed beside my name, and I can tell you there is nothing whatever to be got out of doing it back to somebody else. She set the tray down. Besides which, 11 of them will be asked to subscribe to the chapel school in October, and they will find it uncommonly hard to refuse me now. Thaddeus looked at his wife. That is the most frightening thing you have ever said to me. Yes, said Maud comfortably. Ring for the tea. That was the last remarkable thing that happened at Fenmere, and neither of them ever wanted another. The glasshouse took 940 pains and a new stove and cost £480, and the fig that had come through the roof was kept, because Maud said it had earned it. There were vines in it by the 2nd summer and a peach against the back wall that never came to much. Thaddeus went down there most evenings in the warm weather and did nothing whatever, which he had been very bad at all his life and got slowly better at. Elias Hollis took the south lodge, having gone over both rooms with his hands and pronounced the chimney sound, and the fen went on coming to him, a wrist, a collarbone, a chest, at all hours, up the drive and round to the lodge door, as though it were still a toll house on £11 a year. Thaddeus held the candle a good many times at the exact height he was told, and was told about it when he let it drop. You are wandering, sir. I am not wandering. The light is on the ceiling, said Elias Hollis. 4 inches lower and a hand's breadth to your left, and do not sulk, it is very common in beginners. He lived 9 years more and died in the lodge in October with his daughter's hand in his and the window open, and there were 60 people at Wick End for him, and a good many of them had bones in them that he had set. The causeway rail was rebuilt in stone the summer they married, the whole 3/4 of a mile of it, and the drainage commissioners were shown the bill and made to look at it. The drove was never stopped up, the toll house was never pulled down. Maud put a widow from Sedgeholt into it with 2 rooms and a garden and the keeping of the gate, and the tolls went to the Wick End Chapel School, and the board with the fixed charges on it was repainted every 4 years in the same letters, and it is there yet. She kept the estate book. That was not a concession made to her, it was simply what happened, because she opened it in June to look for something and never shut it. Fenmere paid its own way in the 4th year for the first time since the Duke's grandfather, and the man who had waited 9 years for somebody to ask him a question was made agent over 3 parishes and died a churchwarden. Sir Talbot went out in the summer and lived 11 years in the colony and wrote twice, in the 2nd and the 7th year. Thaddeus answered both briefly and sent money and never spoke of it to anybody but his wife, and she never asked him to. Dr. Peel wrote once as well, a very long letter, and got no answer at all. The receipt hung in the estate room in a plain black frame beside the fireplace, where the light from the window fell on it in the afternoon, and visitors asked about it, and Thaddeus told them every time, all of it, in about 90 seconds, and never once made it sound better than it had been. The 6pence sat on the mantel beneath it in a little brass dish, and the toll book of that year was in the drawer below, with paid written against the entry for the 3rd of November, and on a warm evening in the 2nd summer, on the flood bank above Saint's Drove, with the water going out gold all the way to Sedgeholt and the sedge grey gold, and a punt somewhere out on the mere lode with a man singing at it. The Duke of Fenmere leaned on his stick and asked his wife the question he had been carrying about since the 13th of November, on the night of the flood. When the punt came, and they told you to come away, did you think about it? Maud Hollis considered it properly, the way she considered everything, with her arms folded into her shawl. Yes, she said, for about as long as it takes to say it. There was room for 2, and my father is 71, and you could not sit up, and if I had got in that punt you would have been under a foot of water inside the hour, and I should have had to live in this parish afterwards. She shrugged. It was not a great deal of thinking, Thaddeus. It has been made a good deal more of since than it deserves. Everybody in this county thinks it was the finest thing done here in 50 years. Everybody in this county was in their beds, said Maud. I was standing in the water and I could not lift you, and that is the whole of it, and if you go on making a song of it I shall charge you 6pence. I have not got 6pence. No, said his wife. Well, it says owing. She put her hand through his arm, and they turned round and went back along the flood bank towards the lights of the lodge and the house beyond it, at the pace of a man on a stick, with the whole flat gold country going quiet around them, and the gate stood open behind them for anybody who wanted to come through it.